Allahu Akbar.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam wa Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome you all to another session from Commentary in the 40 Hadith, our Imam an-Nawawi's Arba'in. And alhamdulillah, we are now on Hadith number 32, Avoiding Harm. And let us begin the recitation of this beautiful Hadith. عن أبي سعيد سعد بن مالك بن سنان الخضري رضي عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا ضرر ولا ضرار. حديث حسن رواه ابن ماجه والدارقطني وغيرهما مسندا، ورواه مالك في موطأ مرسلا عن عمرو بن يحيى عن أبيه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسقط أبا سعيد وله طرق يقوي بعضها بعضا. Translation is narrated on the authority of Abu Sa'id Sa'ad bin Malik bin Sinan al-Khudri radhiallahu anhu that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is neither harming nor reciprocating harm. And Imam Nawawi says this is a Hasan hadith which Ibn Majah, ad-Daraqutni and others have related it having a sound isnad. And Imam Malik related in his Muwatta with a broken isnad from Amr bin Yahya from his father from the Prophet ﷺ, but dropping the name of Abu Sa'id. So this hadith has lines of transmission which strengthen one another so that it may be regarded as having sound isnad. So as is our tradition, let us go to the life of the narrator, who is a very important Sahabi, particularly in the realm of hadith. And this is none other than Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that we have heard many times in terms of being a narrator of many of the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri was an Ansari from the original inhabitants of Madinah Munawwara and one of the younger companions of the Prophet ﷺ. During the Battle of Uhud, and during the Battle of Uhud, his father Malik took him to the Prophet ﷺ and asked that he, yani Abu Sa'id, be included in the battle. And at that time, he was only 13 years age. But his father said to the Prophet ﷺ, he is a big-boned boy, O Messenger of Allah. He has big bones. But the Messenger still considered him a child and refused to have him participate in the battle. Okay. But Abu Sa'id would participate in later battles. And Abu Sa'id is one of the narrators of hadith most frequently quoted and mentioned. By one count, he has approximately 1,170 narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, making him the 7th most prolific companion in the transmission of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And many narrate from him, which includes the like of his own son Abdul Rahman, his wife Zainab bin Ka'ab bin Ajrad, Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah bin Abbas, Abu Tufail, Nafi' and Ikramah. Okay. Abu Sa'id, he brought his son to Jannatul Baqi, the cemetery, and he said, "O my son, if I die someday, bury me there, and do not make a tent for me, nor weep for me with wailing, and do not tell anyone about me." And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri would pass away in approximately 63 or 74 after Hijri in Madinah Munawwara in the seat of the Prophet ﷺ. So let's now transition to this hadith, this short but sweet and very important hadith, particularly in the realm of fiqh. And this hadith is considered by the leading jurists as one of the most important ahadith in Islam. Imam Abu Dawud states that this is one of the 4 hadith or ahadith that the sunnah is based around, and one of the 5 ahadith that fiqh revolves around. As per Imam Abu Dawud, for example, when he's looking at those 4 hadith that the sunnah revolve around, this is regarding hadith number 1, the hadith on niyyah, hadith number 6 that we talked about doubt and staying away from the doubtful matters. Number 10 also, which is the hadith on purity, and this hadith. Regarding fiqh, Imam Abu Dawud, he says that it's hadith number 1, number 6, number 12, 13, and number 32, which is this hadith that fiqh also revolves around. So very paramount hadith in the realm of the Sunnah and also the fiqh and Islam in general. In addition, this hadith has led to the birth of the qawaid al-fiqhiyya, or fiqh maxims, the science of qawaid. Okay, qawaid fiqhi. So fiqh maxims. And fiqh maxim is actually a general principle of fiqh that governs almost all of the cases under its scope, regardless of the area of the fiqh. Okay, so we'll look at this hadith, and actually the following hadith as well is a very important hadith in the realm of qawaid al-fiqhiyya, or fiqh maxims. Okay, so we'll inshallah introduce you to this topic and build upon it in the next session, bi'idhnillah. And from this hadith, any act which causes harm to others, like as this hadith mentions, la darara wa la dirar, whether it's individual or community-based, is prohibited in Islam. And this is regardless of whether the harm will bring some type of benefit. And scholars state that those in authority should prevent such harm. If it cannot be prevented, then the effort should be exerted to ensure that the harm is at least removed or minimized. And this all from these few words, la darara wa la dirar. So now let's go to the sanad of this hadith, okay, and also its other narrations. So in this hadith, Imam Nawawi states a long sentence regarding his sanad. And the reason why is that in general this hadith is weak, but is strengthened by other narrations. He makes this point again, being a muhaddith, he has to emphasize that it has to have a basis for being used. So he says, رواه ابن ماجه والدارقطني وغيرهما مسندا ورواه مالك في موطأ مرسلا عن عمرو بن يحيى عن أبيه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسقط أبو سعيد. Okay, and so here in Muwatta, Abu Sa'id has been dropped. وَلَهُ طُرُقٌ يُقَوِّي بَعْضُهَا بَعْضًا. But at the end of the day, it is hadith Hasan. So it's a Hasan hadith. So, and there's also another narration of this hadith narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, where the Prophet ﷺ says, لَا ضَرَرَ وَلَا ضِرَارَ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. There is no harming nor reciprocating harm in Islam. Ibn Rajab states that this is gharib, yani strange hadith, which sort of makes it a bit weak, but is strengthened by other factors. Al-Haytami, another famous muhaddith, and Shaykh al-Albani mentioned this is sound, but they note that one of the narrators in the chain, Ibn Ishaq, was a mudallis. Again, this is a potential ilal or hidden defect in one of the narrators. Okay. So going forward, we have another version of this hadith which echoes the same general meaning, which is Hasan. Where Rasulullah says, Man darra adarra Allahu bihi wa man shaqa shaqa Allahu alayh. If anyone harms others, Allah will harm him. And if anyone shows hostility to others, Allah will show hostility to him. And this is narrated by Abu Simra in Sunan Abu Dawud, graded as Hasan by Shaykh al-Albani. Going forward, lessons. Okay, and also the meaning of this hadith, La dara wa la dirar. So there are several translations of the text of this hadith. And from the grammar of this statement, there is extra emphasis placed on both words, such as there is a categorical prohibition. So what is it in darar and dirar which show that there is categorical negation? And we talked about this before. For example, La ilaha illallah, not la ilahun. La ikraha fid din. So similarly, la darara wa la dirar, that single fatha at the end denote that this is the la nafi wal jins, the categorical negation, which categorically denies that there is to be no harm nor reciprocating harm. So this applies to all types of darar and dirar. Now looking at the word darar, this is a noun. And this means harming others or harming another. So here harm is done even though it does not benefit the one doing harm. Okay, so there is no darar in the Sharia. It means that there is no harm in the Sharia. For example, if a sick person was to pray standing and would get harm, then he should pray sitting. Likewise, if making tahara with water that would harm him, then he should make tahara with tayammum. Okay, so there is no darar in the Sharia, meaning if something is going to harm you, avoid it. Okay, avoid it and do something else. On the other hand, the word dirar has a verbal meaning. It's a verbal noun, that a certain action brings some benefit to the doer while causing harm to the other. And both of these harms are not allowed in the Sharia. Causing harm without any valid reason is rejected, and also the same thing, causing harm to benefit yourself is also not accepted. Okay. Let's go forward to get some more benefit and hikmah from this hadith. Okay. So intending harm. The meaning of this Nawawi hadith is echoed in various ayat of the Quran Kareem. In particular, some ayah use the same root words that are used in this hadith, which is dar. Okay. And on the topic in which harm is mentioned, parallel to this hadith, is on the topic of wasiyah, or bequest. In Surah Nisa, ayat 12 to 14, Allah has dictated this. He says, after any bequest which was made or debt, as long as there is no detriment caused. This is an ordinance from Allah, and Allah is knowing and forbearing. These are the limits set by Allah, and whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will be admitted by Him to gardens under which rivers flow, abiding eternally therein. And that is the great attainment. And whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, He will put him into the fire to abide eternally therein, and he will have a humiliating punishment. Surah An-Nisa. And from the end of the ayah is mentioned that a bequest can be made as long as it does not cause harm. The limits of a bequest from one's fortune have been specified for the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith narrated by Sa'ad bin Malik. He says, عادني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا مريض فقال أوصيت قلت نعم قال بكم قلت بمالي كله في سبيل الله قال فما تركت لولدك قلت هم أغنياء بخير قال أوصي بعشر فما زلت أناقصه حتى قال أوصي بالثلث وثلث كثير قال أبو عبد الرحمن ونحن نستحب أن ينقص من ثلث لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وثلث كثير. The Messenger of Allah came to visit me when I was sick. He said, do you have a will? I said, yes. He said, for how much? I said, all of my wealth for the cause of Allah, fi sabilillah. He said, what did you leave for your children? He said, they are rich in goodness. He said, will a tenth, yani give a tenth. Sa'ad said, he continued decreasing it until he said, will a third. And a third is also too great. One of the narrators, Abdul Rahman, said, we considered it recommended that it be less than a third, since the Messenger of Allah, so some said, and a third is too great. Hadith is in Jami' at-Tirmidhi and graded as Sahih as per Hafiz Zubair Ali Zai. So from this hadith we see that one cannot give away more than 1/3 of wealth, even if it was for the sadaqah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reasons for this limit is on the wasiyah is to ensure that harm is not caused to those of his immediate family who have rights on inheriting the money. And also you have to understand, situations also may arise when a person wishes to distribute more in favor of one of the inheritors. To favor any of the inheritors causes harm, as this is clearly a major sin. Okay, so this has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Furthermore, we see the great punishment that this person is eligible for, mentioned previously in the ayat of Surah An-Nisa. Some Muslims unfortunately practice this out of ignorance or self-interest. So the prevention of harm in marriage and divorce is stressed in the Quran. In Islam, divorce is finalized with the pronouncement of the word talaq, a total of 3 times by the husband. If, however, talaq is pronounced once or twice, then it is allowed for the husband to return to the wife for reconciliation. This is termed ar-raja, or returning. However, as stated in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 231, the husband cannot use ar-raja to keep the wife, for example, hanging between marriage and divorce from spite or harm or hatred. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala women, and they have nearly fulfilled their term, either retain them according to acceptable terms or release them according to acceptable terms, and do not keep them, intending harm to transgress against them. And whoever does that certainly has wronged himself. And do not take the verses of Allah in jest. And remember the favor of Allah upon you, and what has been revealed to you of the book and wisdom by which He instructs you. And fear Allah and know that Allah is knowing of all things. Another topic of harm is that of al-ila, which is basically an oath of the husband not to have relations with his wife. Okay. And so this can cause harm. Islam has set a limit to this oath. Al-ila can last only for 4 months, as specified in the Quran. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says,
لِلَّيُؤْلُونَ مِن نِّسَائِهِمْ تَرَبُّصُ 4 أَشْهُرٍ فَإِن فَاءُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَّحِيمٌ.
For those who swear not to have sexual relations with their wives is a waiting time of 4 months. But if they return, to normal relations, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful. Surah Baqarah, ayah 226. So after this period of 4 months, the husband has to return to his wife, where his repentance is to have relations with his wife. And if this does not occur, then the marriage is legally void, based on the following hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Ibn Umar, who said, كان يقول في الإيلاء الذي سمى الله لا يحل لأحد بعد الأجل إلا أن يمسك بالمعروف أو يعزم بالطلاق كما أمر الله عز وجل. So it is narrated that Ibn Umar used to say concerning al-ilah, if the period of al-ilah expires, then the husband has to either retain his wife in a handsome manner or to divorce her as Allah has ordained. Furthermore, Ibn Umar said that when the period of 4 months has expired, then the husband should be put into prison so that he should divorce his wife, but the divorce does not occur unless the husband himself declares it. This has been mentioned by Uthman, Ali, Abu Darda, Aisha, and 12 other companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's pretty clear that the husband cannot use this to leave the wife hanging because of enmity. And furthermore, another wisdom is extracted from these ahadiths, that the husband should not travel or be away from one's spouse or family for a long time, as this will cause harm to them. And furthermore, in regards to cases of divorce, the husband is not allowed to take the baby away from the mother and disallow her to breastfeed the baby. This is prohibited and stated 2 complete years for whoever wishes to complete the nursing period. Upon the father is the mother's provision and their clothing according to what is acceptable. No person is charged with more than his capacity. No mother should be harmed through her child, and no father through his child. So look at the justice of Islam as well, and to the point where the mother, the breastfeeding mother, despite the divorce, her provision and also her clothing are provided by the father. Next, causing harm in business transactions. Okay. So in regards to business transactions, it is haram for the seller to intentionally inflate the price for an item which he knows a prospective buyer is highly in need of. This is not allowed. Okay. And some scholars also say that this is a form of riba, which is a major sin, of course, as we know in Islam. Ali ibn Abi Talib narrates the following hadith. He says, "A time is certainly coming to mankind when people will bite each other, and a rich man will hold fast to what he has in his possession, though he was not commanded for that." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "And do not forget liberality between yourselves." The men who are forced will contract sale, while the Prophet ﷺ forbade forced contract, one which involves some uncertainty and the sale of fruit before it's ripe. And this is hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud and Sahih ibn as per Albani. So if the prospective purchaser or the buyer wishes to buy an item but is not good at bargaining, the seller must not sell the item at a very high price or more than it is worth. This is prohibited. According to Imam Malik, rahimahullah, the Imam of Fiqh, it is regarded as haram if the sale of the price exceeds the actual price by the sum of 1/3. Similarly, Imam Ahmad equates this practice as to cheating or deception. So look at the justice of Islam. Furthermore, Islam encourages leniency to one who is in debt. In Surah Baqarah, ayah 280, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
وَإِن كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ وَأَن تَصَدَّقُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ.
And if someone is in hardship, let there be postponement, yani of the debt, until a time of ease. But if you give as sadaqah, then it is better for you only if you knew. So thus by deferring or remitting a debt, harm is avoided. Going forward in this hadith, la darar wa la dirar. So good actions which have the potential for harm. So this hadith, this encourages us to have foresight in our actions. And this is even if we have a good intention in doing an action for ourselves that is good, beneficial, and proper. So it is possible that this seemingly good action may actually be incorrect or disallowed because of its potential for harming another person. For example, a neighbor may erect a 2-story house right next door and intending to benefit himself and his family. However, if this causes an invasion of privacy of the neighbor's fence, then this action may not be allowed. Here we see that the prevention of harm takes precedence over gaining benefit. Another example can be taken from a famous incident in Andalusia, Muslim Spain. And there was a mosque or masjid which had been erected where the muaddin would the minaret to call the adhan. After several years, many houses had been erected around the masjid. And when this occurred, the fuqaha had ruled that the muaddin should stop going up to the minaret to call the adhan from there, because there was, he would be able to view inside the property of the surrounding houses, and this would infringe on their privacy. Okay, so because of this, so the scholars had prohibited the muaddin from calling the adhan from the top of the minaret. Okay, so this is a nice example of application of this hadith at that time. Okay, and also perhaps now as well. Going forward, individual harm versus general harm. So if there is a conflict between an individual harm and the public harm, then the prohibition of public harm takes precedence. One example of this maxim is the punishment issued for breaking a general law. Any society in fact has this. This is present in all societies. An individual is punished so that the harm is prevented from reaching society. So for example, you get a penalty when you cross a red light. This is to prevent a greater harm of an accident, a great accident, which can happen, whether big or small. So here, an individual harm occurs, such as penalty or penalization, to prevent a much greater harm to society. La darara wa la dirar. And this also serves to establish justice and order, not just in Muslim societies, but also non-Muslim societies as well. And this is important when looking also at the had punishments in Islam, for example, which were discussed in hadith number 14. Okay, they were harsh to prevent spread of corruption among the society, and so small harm intended to prevent a great harm to society. Also, harming the neighbor. So it's very important, and we looked at this when discussing the hadith, treat the neighbors with the utmost honor and respect. And so it's important that we are prudent in avoiding harm to our neighbors, as they are the most readily affected by our daily action of life around our house or property. Okay, so it's more likely that neighbor can be harmed unintentionally because of their proximity. So the two Imams, Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad, cite examples of, for example, burning rubbish on one's property during a windy day, resulting in smoke and dust reaching the neighbor. Furthermore, when there's a conflict between a major harm and a minor harm, then the major harm should be avoided. And this comes from maxims from this beautiful hadith. Okay, so the Muslims need to tolerate the minor harm for the sake of avoiding the major harm. So the maxims from this hadith are relevant also when giving nasiha to others. Specifically, this is when we encourage others to do ma'aruf and forbid them from the munkar or evil actions. So the nasiha should be given in a wise and kind manner, such that it will be properly received instead of being regarded as a harsh criticism. One may even forego giving advice if it is very likely that it will cause a greater harm. Every situation is different, and this beautiful hadith also takes into account protecting the self as well. So going forward, okay, let's put all this together. So many maxims have been derived from just one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So as per the ulama, for example, the following maxims we see. Number 1, harm is to be prevented as much as possible. Number 2, harm should be eradicated or removed. Number 3, harm should not be removed by another similar harm. And number 4, a greater harm can be removed by a lesser harm. Number 5, the presence of a specific harm is accepted to ward off a general harm. For example, the had punishments or penal code in societies. Number 6, the prevention of harm should take precedence over the gaining or attaining benefit. So for example, building a building which will cause invasion of privacy. Okay. Number 7, if there is a conflict between the prohibition or the permissibility of a certain action, precedence is given to the prohibition of that specific or respective action. And number 8, something which is harmful should not be given precedence just because it is pre-existing. The pre-existence of some harm cannot be a cause for its justification or legitimacy. Okay? So if there's a culture of something, Islam comes in and has to remove that if it's causing some harm. So from these principles, subhanAllah, we see the great practicality and use of this hadith, both at the individual level and also at the societal level. And when we look at these great maxims, we see that they encourage us to anticipate the harm and also to prevent it from occurring. Again, have foresight and be positive in terms of preventing greater harm before it occurs. And this is perhaps why scholars recommend doing things right from the first instance, because precaution prevents harm. Highlights from this hadith. But there are many great fiqh maxims that we have derived from just a few words of this profound hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The meaning of this hadith is that any act that causes harm to others individually or communally or generally is prohibited in Islam. This is the case even if the act is a beneficial one or the person doing the action carries a good intention or niyyah. And through this application, the application of this hadith, harm and injustice and dhulm are prevented, and the society is benefited in many different respects. Okay. Furthermore, those who are in authority should intervene and prevent any harmful act from occurring. And even before this, they should anticipate the occurrence of harm before it occurs. Okay. And if the harm cannot be prevented, then at least minimize it. Okay. So altogether, from this hadith we see great practicality and benefits, again, both at the macroscopic level and also at the microscopic level at the individual. And with this, inshallah, we will close. Hopefully we have gained benefit and more insight from the wisdom of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.